Good evening, all. I hope you all doing great.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, sir. You can take over the class. You can start the session.
Yes, ma'am. Just a minute, I'll share the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, hello, everyone. Uh, a very good evening to all. So I hope everyone's having a very good day. So welcome to the day two of Angular full stack development. So before we get into what today's topic is, I'll just go through what we went through yesterday. So yesterday, what we went through is what is basically full stack development. So as you can see here, the majority of the topics. So since yesterday I had to cover most of the theory part, so today it's going to be practical. So I want every one of you to run your laptops or your computers or wherever you're working on. So what we learned yesterday is, so there is something called as front end and back end. So we learned how many frameworks or how many languages are there in the front end, and then how many languages are there in the back end, right? So afterwards, we learned what is something called as full stack. So what do you mean by full stack, which handles both front end as well as back end? So second, we learned how a web application works, right? So we understood who are the users, and then we understood what is the front end, and then we understood what is the server, as well as we understood what is the database, and then how all these three communicates with each other. You understood, right? So from front end, you'll get the request, from back end, you'll get the response. And then the next topic we covered is what are APIs. So APIs are nothing but your application programming interface. So what does it mean by? That means you have this server, you have the server, you have the client. So you need some guy in the between to understand both these guys, right? For example, servers needs a common logic to send the data to the server, as well as the client needs something both in common. So that common thing is API. So the most common format is JSON, which is nothing but objects in your JavaScript. So if you're familiar with Python, you can compare JSON to your dictionary. Understood, right? So next is Node.js. So we understood what is Node.js. So Node.js is nothing but a runtime environment. Say, for example, you want to run your React application, you want to run your Angular application. So you need some machine to run it, right? So that thing is called as Node.js. Understood. So also yesterday we learned how to install it. So you should have to go through that website, so which is Node.js, and then go to here, and then you need to install the latest version, which is long-term support. So even though yesterday I had a question, so someone had asked, so how do I update this Node.js? So you don't have to update it. So you just click on this link and then install whatever file is there. So Node.js, what it does is it will automatically remove your older version and then it updates to the new version, right? So then we learned what is NPM. So what is an NPM? So NPM is a node package manager. So why do we need a package manager? So every language has its own package manager, right? If you compare to Python, so Python has something called a pip. Similar way, so whatever packages we want to use in Angular, we need to use NPM. Okay. And then we learned what is Angular. So what is Angular? So Angular is nothing but a framework which makes our life easier to build a web applications, right? So that is a simple definition I'm saying. So you can go through this definition. So it is used to build SPAs. So what are SPAs? Single page applications. So why do we need single page applications? The reason why we need is, so for each and every change, the whole page doesn't reload for a single page application. Only the section which you are changing, it changes. Whereas in multi-page application, what happens is the whole page gets reloaded every time you visit or else whenever you click on something, which causes a lot of slow or else some issues. So Angular, and then you can see here it is developed by Google, and then these topics we are going to cover today. So you understood, right? Angular is nothing but a framework. Which language does it use? It is used TypeScript. So what is TypeScript? We learned yesterday, right? TypeScript is nothing but a superset of JavaScript. So what is superset? Superset is nothing like a wrapper around the JavaScript. So the browser understands only JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So what we do is, so we write the code in TypeScript. So what Angular does is it converts our code into JavaScript so that our browser can understand. Understood this part. So why do we need TypeScript again? Because TypeScript is strongly typed, whereas JavaScript is dynamically typed. So then we went through how to set up our Angular application. So today also I'll cover these topics. So we understood what is Node.js, what is CLI. So what is CLI again? CLI is nothing but a command line interface. So why do we need this? The reason why we need CLI is because whenever we want to run some commands related to Angular, we need to use Angular CLI. And then we went through even what is VS Code. So VS Code is nothing but your IDE. So what is an IDE? Integrated development environment. So whatever code we're going to write, it's going to be inside our VS Code. So then we learned how to install Angular globally. So this is the command you can see here, which is npm -g Angular/CLI. So what it does is it install your Angular application. So then you need to create your new project, which is ng new project. And then how do you run an Angular application? It is ng serve. You understood this part? So and then you went through this folder structure, right? So this TypeScript is configured for, it's all automatically configured by the Angular itself. And then we have something called as package.json, package.json, which contains our dependencies. And then Angular JSON, which consists our settings, and then SRC, which is our main file. So today, most of our work is going to be inside the SRC itself. So, and then after this, we learned what are type annotations. So today so yesterday we learned the theory of it. So today we'll practically see how to assign type annotations to your TypeScript variables. And then we learned what are classes, interfaces. So interfaces also we'll cover later on the chapter. So it's not much important. So and then we learned what is a CLI. So a CLI is a command line interface. So this is a very important image because we'll be visiting this oftentimes. I'll just zoom in a little. So, and then afterwards, we understood what are components. So every UI, so say for example, any website, we divide everything inside into small components. And then we work on these components. And then at the end of the day, what we do, we bring all the components together, right? So every component, so yesterday also you learned how to generate a component. How do you generate a component? The command is ngGC component name. So every component contains template, which is your HTML, CSS, and TS file. So today we are going to build a small application. So it's called as a student management application. So I hope everyone is following me because it's going to be practical. So I want every one of you to be hands-on. So before that, I'll start the process. So first, go to your desktop and then right click, new, and then your folder. I'll create Angular day 2. So then what you need to open your VS Code. So what I need to do is, I'll just go to file, open your folder, and then you need to select the folder which you have created. So which is the folder which I created? Angular day 2. Select this folder. Okay. So once you select this folder, so what happens is you'll get a pop-up, small pop-up saying, yes, I trust the authors. So then I'll zoom in a little so that you can see better. So here you can see I have opened my folder name. Here also you can see, here also you can cross-verify whether you have the same repository open. So then what you need to do, you need to open your terminal. So how do you open your terminal? You have something like called as three dots here. Click on this terminal, new terminal. So once you open a new terminal, so what happens is by default, everyone will be having PowerShell. So, but I suggest you to change it to command prompt because command prompt, it doesn't give you much errors or much conflicts for you. So how to change your default terminal is, you can see a small icon next to the plus. click on this and then select default profile. Here you will be having different terminals. As of now, we need only command prompt. So you can click on command prompt. So once you click on command prompt, you need to close it and then open it again. 3 dots, terminal, new terminal. So now you can see I have my command prompt. Go to this, select default profile and then select command prompt. So now you need to check whether my path and this path is matching. So if this is matching, so what I'll do, I'll generate a new Angular project. So what is the command? The CLI command. So every CLI commands basically starts with ng. So you have to remember this NNG. So ng new student management project and then hit enter. And then it'll ask whether you want your CSS. So, and then click enter because I want CSS. And then it'll ask whether you want server-side rendering. So I don't want this. I'll just click on N, which is for no, and then enter. So you can see Angular is generating my project. So wait for some time until it gets generated. So you can see here, as soon as I hit on ngg new, my project name. So Angular has started doing its work. So it started generating my files. So we went through these files. So these files are nothing but your TypeScript configuration. And then we also went through what is our package.json, which contains our dependencies and dev dependencies, right? So if someone asks you what's the difference, dependencies comes in your production code. Dev dependencies is just for the development. Okay. So then you have angular.json. So what happens in angular.json? You have the entire project's settings. So you can change your styles here, scripts and all. Scripts are nothing but your JavaScripts, okay? You can change your configurations. So this and all, it's an advance. For example, say if you're a very senior developer in Angular, so you'll start working on this. So as of now, just try to go through this and then get familiar with what and all options Angular is giving you. And then you have something called as SRC. You understood this, right? So inside SRC, you have these files. So how it works is, so whenever you run an Angular application, by default, you'll be having only one HTML file. Okay, this may sound surprising for you, but that's how Angular is created. So there will be only one index.html file. So what happens is, this index.html file is linked to this main.ts. So yesterday we went through what is a component, right? So component is nothing but a part of your UI. So what happens is, by default, Angular will generate a component called as app. So what is app? App is a component which is automatically generated by the Angular itself. So why do we need app? The reason why we need app is app is called as a root component. So say, for example, if you take React as well as Angular, in both you'll find something called as root component. It is similar in both the frameworks. What the root component does is, so whenever I open my index file, what Angular does is, it will also attach my root component. You can see here, app.root. So what do you mean by app.root? So this is not your HTML. So don't get confused with HTML. This is how you call your component. You understood the syntax? This is just the syntax. It looks familiar to HTML, but don't get confused with the HTML. So what happens is, so you can see every component has 3 files, right? One is CSS, one is your HTML, and then your other is your TS file. So this spec.ts, it is used for testing. So as of now, we won't touch this since we are developing, so we are not testing. So we'll just work on these 3 files, CSS, HTML, and TS. So if you come to TS, if you see this right, from line 10 to 12, you have something called as export class app component. So this is nothing but your class. You understood this? So this is how the classes are defined in your TypeScript. So whatever code, whatever logic you write, so all the code and logic is written here. Understood this? All your code and logic is written here inside your class. So how do you, so say for example, I know what is this class. So, but for Angular to differentiate, what it does is it will use something called as decorator. So what is decorator? So decorator is nothing but which contains the metadata. Metadata means it contains some information about what you are about to use. So since this is my app component, so for each and every component, there will be a decorator called as @ component. So this is generated by the Angular itself. You don't have to worry about this. So what Angular basically is saying is whatever class is below me is called as a component. So treat this class as a component. Okay. So what happens is, so every component will be having few properties. So these properties are similar for each and every component. Okay. So first, the property name is selector. Selector name is you are giving the name for this component. So don't get confused by this and this. This is your class name, whereas this is your selector. Okay. So app-root. This sounds familiar, right? So we saw this before itself. Where was it? App-root. It was in your index. Did you see here? App-root. So whenever you want to call your component, you need to use what is there in your selector. Okay, you understood this? So whenever I want to use this app component, I should not use this app component class name. I need to use the selector name. This selector name is generated by the Angular itself. This will be prefixed. Okay, app.hyphen is prefixed. So whatever you have, the name you have given will be attached here. So we'll go through this so as we create components here. Understood, right? Whenever you want to call a component, you need to use the selector name. Second is imports. We'll go through what are imports. And then your template.url. So what is template.url? You can see it has a value called as .html, which is this. Understood? And then your style URL, which is this. So what this class is doing is, it is connecting your TS file as well as your HTML file as well as your class file. So within this single block of code, this component is saying that this app component's HTML is this app component's style is this. Okay. So what this basically does is, it is stitching these three files together, which is your TS file, HTML file, and then your CSS file. Understood this? So now what I'll do is, so since my application has been successfully installed, so what I'll do, I need to go to my project folder location. So what is the command? cd space tab, and then hit enter. So since my both paths are matching here, I'll run the application. So how do you run the Angular application? ng-serve, and then hit enter. So now what Angular does is, it will run my application inside a local host. You can see it is saying building. So once it starts building, it will give me a link for it. You can see this is my link. Just copy this link, Control-C, and then I'll go to my Chrome and then paste here. So now you can see Angular is successfully running my application. So what I'll do is, I'll open my VS Code as well as this side by side so that it will be easier for you to understand. Okay, so now what I'll do is, since I know app component is generated by Angular, so I'll just select all this and then delete it. I don't want any of this code. You can see it's vanished. So then go to your CSS. So it is nothing. Okay, so now we'll start everything from the scratch. Okay, so now if this your setup is completed, let us try writing some HTML. Where do you write your HTML? Inside your HTML file. I'll create h1 Hello all. So now you can see Angular has generated my HTML inside this localhost, which is 4200, where my Angular application is running. So now I'll just create a class for this. And then this class, where do I need to call this class? Inside my CSS. Dot. I'll just set a background color for this, light blue. So now you can see my HTML and CSS is running. So now what happens is, so since I told you in your TS file, all data goes here. Okay, so before we go into data, so let us just see what are data types which are available in your TypeScript. So one is number, second is string, third is Boolean. So there are many data types, something like undefined also, which are all unnecessary because most of the times you'll be using only these three types. And then you have something called as arrays and then objects. So there are different things. So let's see. So how do you create a variable inside your TypeScript file? So don't get confused with TypeScript. So even though if you don't know TypeScript, so think of TypeScript as an elder brother to the JavaScript. Okay, so since most of you guys are familiar with it, so it will be like 80 to 90% similar to TypeScript. So whenever I want to create a variable, say I want to create a variable called as my name. So what I need to do is, so what is the syntax to create a, can see here, the syntax is colon and then specify the data type. Similarly, what I'll do, so this is my variable name, colon, sorry, colon, I need to specify my data type. So what is my data type? It is a string, is equals to, you understood this? Basically, what I'm doing is I'm creating a variable and then assigning the type of the variable. And then what I'm doing is creating a variable, assigning the type to it, and then assigning a value. Similar way, say for example, if I want to create a variable of number. So what I'll do, marks, it is of type number is equals to 55. Understood this? So this is how you create a variable in TypeScript with type string. This is how you create a variable with type number. So with type Boolean is student. This is of type Boolean. Boolean is equals to true. Understood this part? So now let us see. So now you know all the data contained inside your TypeScript file. So, but what is the use of data when you can't show the data, right? So what happens is, so all the data and logic goes inside your TypeScript. So, but which part of your file shows the data? Your HTML, right? So that means there should be some kind of connection between your TS file as well as your HTML file. Understood? So whatever data I'm having inside my TS file, it should be visible inside my HTML. If it is not visible, then there's no point of having the data here, right? So basically what you do is all the data goes here and then this data should be visible in your HTML file. The reason because we want to see only the HTML file. We are not seeing the TS file in the browser, right? In the browser, you can see it's hello all. Where is hello all? It is inside your HTML. So how do I show my variable which contains data inside my HTML? So in TypeScript, there is something called as data binding. So what is data binding? Data binding is whatever data you can see this diagram here, whatever data you are having inside the class, that data you are displaying inside your view. So what is your view? Your HTML. Understood this? What is the syntax for it? So there are different types of data binding. So we'll go through this. Just understand this concept. So now the first thing is, I'll remove this. So there is something called as data binding, right? So inside data binding, so you can see this. So this is nothing but comments. So which is similar to your Python. So inside data binding, there are two types. So one is one-way binding, and then there is two-way binding. So the name itself suggests, so one-way means you can display what is inside your TS in your HTML, not the other way around. So if you want the other way around, you need something called as two-way data binding. You understood this? So I'll make it even more simpler. So say for example, what I'll do is I have a variable called as, so inside here you can see I have something called as hello all, but I don't know what the name is. So the name is coming, say for example, so then the name is coming from the backend. So what I'll do is I'll just create my name. It belongs to type string, right? Is equals to Mohan. So what I will do is, so since my variable contains this Mohan value, I'll just copy this, go to your HTML. The syntax is you need to use double flower brackets and then paste. You can see here, hello all Mohan. So, but here you can see it is just my name. So what this syntax is doing is, so this is called as interpolation. So what interpolation does is, whatever variable you have inside your TypeScript, if you use that variable inside flower brackets, that value gets displayed inside your Angular application. So now what I will do, I don't have to go and change inside my HTML. Say for example, if I want to change my name, I'll go to my TS file and then I'll type Sneha. So you can see it changes to Sneha. I'm doing my changes in TypeScript, but it's getting visible inside my HTML. So how it is possible? Because I'm binding my TS as well as HTML. So how am I binding? Using double flower brackets, which is called as interpolation. Understood this? Similar way, there is something called as, so this is called as interpolation. You can see here. So these are the types of binding which are given by the Angular tool. So we covered the first one, right? So what is interpolation? You have this variable inside your component. It belongs to a string. So whatever data is there inside should be visible in your HTML, right? So your template is your HTML. What are the syntax is double brackets and then your variable name. So second is something called as property binding. We'll go through what a property binding is. So now here I'll create a input. Okay. So this input, I'll just give a placeholder. Yeah, so now what happens is, you can see here there is an input. It is saying enter name. So now say for example, if I want to set a default value to this input. So as soon as I get this input, I need some default value here. So this is a placeholder. This is not a value. Okay. So now I need some value to be set here. So what I'll do is every input has a property called as value. So now what I'll do, I'll go to my TS file and then I'll create a variable name here. Default value is it belongs to type string is equals to India. So now what I'll do, whenever this input gets rendered, I need a default value for this. For that, there is something called as property binding. So what I'm doing is, so this is interpolation. I'm just displaying this inside brackets. Whereas property binding, so what happens is, I'll grab this variable. So since this variable contains this value, I'll grab this variable and then I'll go to my input. The syntax is flower brackets, square brackets, and then your variable name. So as soon as I do this, you can see here, there is a default value inside my input. Similar way, if you want to just display your data in your HTML, you need to use interpolation. If you want to set some value to your HTML attributes, you need to use property binding. You understood this? So now there is something called as event binding. So what are events? So you guys would be familiar with click event, mouse event, keyboard events. So what I'll do is, so here inside my component, I will remove this. You understood it? This is called as property binding. So you are attaching a variable to your property. So this is the syntax. So what I'll do is here, I'll create a HR, which is your horizontal row. So second, I'll do greeting message, okay, H1. Okay, so I have something called as greeting message here. So here, I'll leave it blank. Okay. So here what I'll do is I'll create a variable here. What's the variable name? Greeting message value is equals to, I'll saying. So since I have this greeting message, I'll say value. Okay, so this message contains good evening, all. How are you? I like Angular. So how do I make this visible inside my HTML? I need to use interpolation. So copy this variable name, go to your HTML, and then double flower brackets, and then paste it. You can see my message is visible. So now what I'll do is I'll create two new buttons. Okay, button. So this is, I'll write morning. And I'll create another button, evening. Okay, so now what I'm trying to do is when I click on the morning, I need a morning message to be appeared. When I click on the evening, I need a evening message to appear here. Understood? So basically I'm creating two buttons. So, and then you need to click on this next to the button and then type CLICK. First is round brackets, like is equals to, and then you need to define a function name. I'll say, why do we need a function name? So what I'll do is on morning CK and then function. Similar way, copy this and then paste it inside your evening file. So change it to evening. Yeah, so this is button on morning click. So button. So these are nothing but your events. So in JavaScript, you have something called as on click, on drag, or else on mouse enter. So in Angular, we don't have that on. So whenever you create an event, you need to wrap it inside this round brackets and then mention the event name. Click and then a function name. So you can see I have the brackets here. If there is no bracket, it's a variable. If there is a brackets, this is a function. So now what I'll do, copy this and then define the function inside your class. Okay. This is the syntax. How do you define a function inside your class? Second, I'll also copy my evening function. So now what I'll do, when I click on this morning message, with this morning button, this function gets triggered. When I click on this evening button, this evening gets triggered. So since I know this gets triggered, so what I'll do is I'll access this variable inside my function. So you can't directly access this like this. Whenever you are accessing some variable inside a function or else a method which is inside a class, you need to use this dot your variable name. So now what I will do, I'll just copy this entire thing and then I'll paste here. So by default, the greeting message value will be empty string. So you won't see anything here. Once I click on this morning, button, I'm changing the variable's value to this, okay, which is good morning all over you. I like Angular. Similarly, what I'll do, if the guy clicks on evening, so I'll change the message here. This dot greeting message value is equals to good evening. I like React. Okay, now see what happens. You can see by default the greeting message value is empty. Okay, so you cannot see nothing here. As soon as I click on this morning button, you can see I'm getting a morning message. When I click on this evening, you can see I'm getting the evening message. Understood this? This is called as event binding. So what happens is inside your HTML, you create an event and then you attach a function to it. This function you need to define inside your class, which is your app component. Once you define this function, you need to write your logic here. So this is my logic. So what happens is, so as soon as I click on this button, this function gets triggered and then it will change this value. Similar way, when I click on this evening button, this function gets triggered and then it changes this value. You can see I'll toggle here. This is now when I click on evening, it says evening. When I click on morning, it says morning. Understood this part? So now what we'll do is we'll start creating components and structuring our application. So go to your SRC and then right click on SRC, new folder. Oh, sorry, inside your app, new folder, components. Okay, inside that, click on this components, right click, open in your integrated terminal. So here you need to generate two components. So one is ng gc header and then hit enter. Okay. So the second component is once this component gets created, the second component is ng gc student table. Understood? So here you can see if I go to my components, there are two components generated here, which is you can see here, there are two components generated, which is header and student table. So what I'll do is, first, I'll go to my app.html. I'll remove everything. I'll clear everything. So now, since we are starting from fresh, so what I'll do is, so first you need to go to your HTML. So how do you call a component? So since I know app component is the root component, so this component gets rendered. So what I need to do is, I need to add this header inside my app.css. So how do I add? You need to copy this selector of this header component. And then you need to go to your app.html and then paste it here. Once you do this, go to your TS file. Inside imports, you need to mention which component you're importing. I want to import my header component. Understood? So now if you see the website, you can see my header component is running inside my app component. You need to understand this. App is running inside my app. I have this header. This is called as nesting. Okay, so here app becomes the parent and then header becomes the child. So now what I'll do is I'll create a div for this header and I'll paste it inside. So here what I'll do is class header container. So now go to your app.component.css. So here what I need to do is, so first thing, what you need to understand is, I need to set up my CSS file inside my app component. So by default, I have this image. So I'm going to use this image, this background image. So you can use any image you want, which it is up to you. So for this project, I'm going to use this background image. So how do you set up? So first is I'll create a class called as app container. Okay. So now I'll take this whole thing, I'll paste it inside my app container. So copy this class, go to your app.css, paste it. So here, what I'll do is first I need to set my minimum height. Minimum height, I will make it 100 VH. So VH means it's your vertical height. Okay. So these are nothing but your response units of your CSS. So then I need to change my background image. So for background image, I'll go to background image and then URL. So inside URL, what I'll do is before that, go to your app, SRC, and then right click, new folder images. So what I'll do is I'll copy paste all my images inside my SRC file. So I'll go here, I'll copy this entire thing, drag and drop inside my images. So now you can see I have all my images accessible inside my images folder. So now you need to link my background image to your images folder. So for that, what you need to do is inside your URL, click on /. And then you can see VS Code will suggest for you images, hit enter, forest background. Yeah. So now what I need to do is, so you can see here, my background image is set. Okay. So even though my background image set, you can see there is some white lines border around here, which looks ugly. So for that, what you need to do is you need to reset your CSS files. So for example, say if you want to write some styles which you want to affect throughout your Angular application, you need to write it inside your style.css. You can see Angular and will say this is your global styles. That means whatever code you write here, it affects your entire components. So to remove all this white and all, which is unnecessary paddings and margins, star margin 0. So I'm removing all the margin and then padding is 0 and then box sizing border box. So this is necessary to remove all your defaults. So now you can see my images fit very nicely here. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll go to my app.css itself. There is still some work left there. So inside here, I'll do background image, background size, make it to cover. That means it will cover your entire application. Now you can see my images successfully. I've added a background image to this. So now what I'll do is I'll create my header component. Where is my header? It is inside my components header. So now remove this and then create a div. So give a class to this. So this class is header container. So inside this, create another div. So this give a class for this header title. So here title you can give anything. So as of now, I'll give XLR here. And then you create another div. So for this, give a class called as header links. So now what you need to do is li. So these are, I'm just giving some dummy links here. So we are going to change these links when we cover routing. And then li, so home, and then about, and then contact. So now once this part is over, so now I need to style this, right? So where do I style? Inside my header.css. So I'll copy this class. Just a minute. Now what I need to do is I'll go to this header container, copy this, go to my header.css, and then paste it here. You can see, so all the data which contains to application goes to my app.css. Since I'm working on a header, everything should be inside my header.css. Okay, don't write your code or everything inside the app itself. Try to write in your specific components. So now what I'll do, I'll select this header container. So inside my header container, I'll give a background color. I'll make it white. You can see here. So whatever I'm typing inside my header, it's visible here. So take a look of as the code as well as this left part. As I'm typing the code, you can see Angular will change this part over. Okay. So now what I'll do, I'll select this title and then create a class for this. Copy this, paste. Sorry, it's not copied properly. I guess. Yeah. Copy this and then dot, and then you need to paste it here. Okay, so now another class, last remaining class is my links. I'll just copy and then paste. So now what I need to do is, so now I'll write some CSS. So now since this is both top and bottom, so I'll make this as a flex box. Flex box, justify content, space between, align items, center. So now what happens is this will get separated. Okay. So now what I'll do, uh, just a minute. I'll go to my title. So in title, I'll change my font size. I'll make it to 10 pixel. It become too small, so I'll make it to 20 pixel. Try 25. So yeah, now it's okay. So now what I need to do is, so now this part is done. So but this part is still remaining, right? So now what I'll do, I'll go to my links. I'll also make this as a display flex. Justify content. Space evenly. List style, none. So what it does is it removes this dots, and then I'll give a padding right to this. Padding right is 10 pixel. So now you can see, so successfully padding it. So now say for example, just a minute, there is a so now what I need to do is, so you can see these are congested, right? So I need to separate them. So for that, I need to select this class and then inside the li class. So this comes under your CSS. So I'm writing the CSS because I hope you already know the CSS because this is a very fundamental for this. So now what I'll need to do this, I'll increase the padding right to another 10 pixel. So now you can see it is successfully separated. So now after this, what you need to do is, I'll give a padding for this header. So for padding, I'll add some 10 pixel. Let's make it 20. So now you can see, so even though my header looks good, my header looks good, it's kind of blocking, right? So there is a trick to make this transparent. So for that, you need to go to your background color, click on this white, and then you can see something called as RGB. So click on this until you get RGB inside this, okay? So once you get RGB, and then after B, you need to write the letter called as A. So if it big, so once you write RGBA, that means you can set a new property here which affects your transparency. Okay, I'll make it comma 0.3. So now you can see my header is transparent. I'll make it 0.4. Okay, so now you can see it is transparent. But now how do I change my color of this text inside my header? So for that, the property is color white. Okay. I'll also change the font of this. Looks too small. So for font size, I'll make it to 15 pixel, 90. So now you can see this is also big. So now I've successfully created my background as well as my header. So how is my header running? So my header is a separate component. So all the styles, all the HTML goes inside my header. So this header I'm calling inside my app component. Okay. How do you call the header? First, you need to copy this selector name, and then you need to import this module inside your app component. Okay. So this is the process. How do you nest a components? So every component you write should be inside this app component, or else it won't be visible, because by default Angular runs your app component. So everything inside your app runs. So if it is not inside your app, it won't display. So now what we'll do is, so we'll start creating a student table. So for that, you have another component here, right? Student table. So go to that. So first, let's just structure the data of our student. So what do you think the data of a student may be? Do you have any idea? So yeah. So the first thing what we'll do is, first, just a minute. There is some error here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, so first, let's just structure the student data. So come to your TS file, which is a student table TS, and then let's create a variable. Student data is equals to array. So this is how you create a syntax to array, and then student. So first, the property is, so this is nothing but your dictionary or else an object, which is similar to JSON. So with this, we'll get to know how to work with JSON. So in the future, if you work on APIs, so it will be similar to this. So ID is 1, and then you have the student name, right? Student. So I'll just give Ravi. Let me make it Rohan. And then what and all will be there? So you have ID, student, and then email, right? Email is on at gmail.com. So then what you, there can be another property called as gender. So gender, I'll make it male. So then what and all, so you can think of any properties you want. So as of now, I'll add something called as marks. I'll make it an integer, which is 55. And then I'll create what is the response. Just keep it an empty string. So what we'll do is, here we can add an emoji. So I'll say how to add an emojis. So you know this property is right. So I'm just creating a variable called as student data, which is an array of one student. So how do I render this data inside my HTML? Using interpolation. You understood that, right? So come to here, and then what you need to do is, first create a main. Main is nothing but your HTML element. Inside main, give a class called as table. Okay. Just a minute. So, so you whatever code you write, all this code should be inside your where? Inside your student.html. So first, the thing is, you need to create something called as main class table. So once that part is done, you need to create two sections. This section, you name it as table header. Okay, again, create another section. This section, you name it as table body. Understood this? So inside my table header, I'll just give the title of this component, which is student table. Okay. So now you can see I created a main of class table. It has two sections. One is my header, one is my body. So inside my body, create a table. So you would have been knowing in HTML. So every table has two elements, which is t head, and then there is something called as t body. So inside t head, you have something. What is that? tr. So what is tr? Table row. So inside row, you need to create th. So this all comes under your fundamentals or HTML. So if I get confusing with this, you need to start revising your HTML once again. So you have this table, it has t head and then tr. And then this tr contains your column names. So what are my column names inside my data? You can see this is my column name. I'll copy this. I'll go over here. I'll paste. Again, what I'll do, I'll copy this student. I'll go over here. Again, I'll create another th and then I'll paste. Again, I'll go to my email. So all these are your columns, okay? So all your values will dynamically generate it. So I'll say how do you dynamically generate? So go to th and then paste. So similar way, do this for all your columns. Gender. So I'll go here, I'll create another th and then paste. Similar way, marks. And then the last column is your response. Okay, so now once these columns are placed, we need to generate the body, right? So inside the body, similar way, just like how you created your tr, you need to create again another tr, which is table row. And then this contains td. So here th means header, td means data. So what happens is in Angular, there is something called as directives. Okay. So what are directives? So directives are nothing but classes which modifies or changes the behavior of elements. So what are your elements? Your HTML. So what happens is, say for example, you have some div which you want to loop, or else say you have some div which you want to show or else not show. For example, like hide and not show. So all these things are handled by the Angular itself. So you don't have to write it from the scratch. So if you're developing a website, you need to write this logic from the scratch. So but what Angular did is, so they have something called as directives. So some directives are inbuilt. Okay, so the most commonly used directives are ngif and ngfor. You can see here. So these are the most commonly used directives. So what is ngif? So the name only suggests. So what does if do? It is similar to your Python. So if the condition is met, it will show your element. If it is not met, it won't show your element. Similar way, you have something called as ngfor. So you know what is for? It is nothing but your loops. So this is how you loop inside your Angular. So we will come across this now. So you can see, so the syntax, how do you create your directive is, every directive should start with a star. This is for your structural directives, okay? So we'll just roughly go through this diagram. So directives are nothing but classes. So these classes are used to modify your elements. Your elements means your HTML. So there are three types of directives. So one is component. So component, so we have already went through what is a component in our code. So this is our components. So component is nothing but a directive which has a template. So what is template? Your HTML file. So another, there are two types of directives. So one is structure directive. The name itself suggests. So what is structure? It can either loop or else it can, based on condition, it will show and not show. And then you have attribute directive. So what it does is it will change the appearance of it. So how do you change an appearance of an HTML? Your CSS, right? So this attributes directives changes your CSS. Whereas structure, it changes the whole structure of the element itself. So now you can see here, the syntax to use is star. So every directive, structural directive, should start with a star. And then ngIf, and then your condition here. So if this condition is true, this data will be shown. If this condition is false, it won't show. So we'll just roughly go over here. So I have this XLR, right? So what I will do is go to here, I'll create a new variable. So is WD. So what I'll do is I'll make this a Boolean. I'll make it false. So now say, for example, if I want to remove this XLR from here, I need to copy this. So before you use any directive, you need to import something called as common module. So go to this component section and then you have imports, right? So inside your imports, what you have to do is type COMMON model. So this common model contains your directives. Okay, this is very important to remember. So before using, you need to import the common model. Okay, so once you import the common model, so now what I'll do is, so if this variable is false, if this is true, I will display the logo. If this variable is false, I won't display. So how do I achieve this? Copy this, and then you need to go to your HTML. So where is my logo? My logo is in a header, right? So I'll go to my header. Here is my logo. So what I'll do, I'll go to my header component. I'll create a variable is allowed. If it is false, by default, I'll set it to false. So now how do I make it a structural directive? Go to your div class. At the end, click on star ng capital IF is equals to your variable name. What is the variable name is allowed. So now what I will do, you can see my XLR is gone, right? You can see to your left here, my XLR logo is gone. So if I make this directive true, you can see it gets appeared. Sorry, you need to import common module here. Now you can see it's loading just now. You can see the logo is visible, right? Because my variable is true. So if I make it to false, the logo gets removed. If I make it to true, it will be shown. So how are you achieving this? This is achieved by ngIf. So ngIf is a inbuilt directive which is given by Angular. Similar way, if you want to loop something, right, you use ngFor. So that directive we are going to use in our project. So coming back to our student project, so what we'll do is, this is an array. So array means to access this object, you need to loop it. So without looping, it's hard to access this object. So what Angular did is, what is the syntax for ngFor? So we understood what is ngIf, right? Based on condition, it will show and then it will hide. So coming to ngFor, this is the syntax of it. So don't get confused by this. So because we'll write this code now. So now I need to, so since I have only one data here, what I'll do, I'll copy and then replicate the same thing again. So I'll make this student2. His name is Sneha. Sneha@gmail.com. And gender is female. Marks, I'll make it 60. The response is empty string. So now you can see inside my student data, I have two objects. So how do I access this inside my HTML? So for that, what I need to do is inside your T body, inside TR, star ng for. Before accessing ng for, what you need to do, you need to import common module. So where do you import that? Inside your import. So I have already installed, I have already imported here. So without this, your code won't run. It'll throw an error. So what I need to do is the syntax. So this syntax is similar to your JavaScript syntax, which is let student of, what is your variable name? Student data. Copy this. Oh, sorry, the spelling is wrong. Student data. So what I'll do is, so now you can see ng for this syntax is similar to your JavaScript. So you don't have to get confused here. So what this does is ng for let student of student data. So now I'll move this to the side so that it will be easier for you to see. So for this component to be appear, so you can see as even though I'm writing this code here, it's not displaying here. The reason is because I'm not calling this student component inside my app component. So for that, what I need to do, I need to copy this selector name, go to my app component .html, and then here I'll create another div. Inside that, I will copy paste this. And I'll create a class. So now what I'll do, so Angular is saying it is, I don't know what a student component is. So for that, what you need to do, you need to import inside your imports. Come here, student table component. So now you can see my data is visible here. Since it's in black, it's not so visible, but my data is actually rendering here. So now what I'll do is come to your student HTML. So we have looping here. And then you need to do TD. Inside TD, student. What is the syntax for string interpolation? Double, right? Double flower brackets. And then paste it dot ID. So now you can see my ID is coming. Then TD student dot student. You can see my name is displaying. Okay, then another TD student dot. So how am I getting this property? So these are properties inside your array. Okay, I'm accessing these properties inside your HTML itself. So don't get confused by this. So these are nothing but your column names. So this is the syntax of your runner loop inside your template using ng for. So what is ng for? Ng for is a directive. It is a structural directive. So now similarly, what I'll do, I'll copy paste for everything. So for email, and then I'll copy this full thing, and I'll paste again. So this is email is done. So next is gender, right? Copy paste this. Again, I'll copy this entire thing, paste. So now is marks. Next, response. I'll copy and then paste. I'm sorry, I need to paste TD. The last column is response. So this is how you access the property from your variable inside ng4. So now you can see my data has been successfully rendered inside my HTML. So how is this data coming here? I'm accessing this data dynamically. That means from TypeScript, I have defined the data, this data I'm rendering inside my HTML using directives. Understood this concept? So whenever you have an array, you need to loop it, right? Without looping, you can't access these elements. Similarly, what you have to do for that, Angular gives you a handy tool called as a ng-for, which is your directive to loop it. So similarly, if you want something to show and not show, you use what? Ng-if. Okay, so these are the most popular directives, so you have to remember this. So now once this part is done, so now once we have successfully created our data and then we connected our data with our HTML. So now let's start styling this so that it looks more beautiful. So for that, I'll come to my student table.css. You can see here, student table component.css. So here what I'll do, first, I'll style what? My table. So I'll just copy this table dot. Why I'm using dot? Because that is the syntax. If you want to, what you want to do, if you want to, so you can see here, right? So this is my, you can see here, this is my student component. Okay, so if I want to access any class inside here, I'll use dot. Say, for example, if I want to access some ID, what is the syntax? Hash. So these things you would have learned in normal HTML or CSS classes itself. So now what I need to do is, so let's start styling our table here. So first, what you have to do is, so since my component, my data, everything inside my student, I need to start writing my style sheets inside my student. So I'll move this to the right side so that as I type here, you can see how the code is being generated here. So what I'll do is first is I'll create a width for it. So how much will I set? So usually widths are set in percentages. So I'll make it 100%. So then what I need to do, this whole thing, right? This whole thing is inside my which file? Inside my main, which belongs to class table. So now, since I know everything is inside this, if I want to change the color of this, I need to add this property inside my table. Since everything is inside, so it will reflect towards the entire application. So you can see here, as soon as I add color here, okay, there is some error here, so we'll fix this. Here, oh yeah, you can see I have used small m, but while accessing, I used capital M. So what TypeScript is saying is, dude, you are using marks. Do you mean small marks? So for that, what I'll do, I can change here, or else I can change there itself. So I'll change here itself. And then come here. You can see now there is no error. So now you can see I've changed the color of my table, right? So now what I'll do, inside my student table.css. So now once width and color has been set, so now I'll start adding padding for my table rows and table columns and then table headers and all. So for that, the syntax is, first I'll select my table and then I'll select my table header. And then what I need to select my table data, right? So for this, what I will do, I'll add a padding for this. So for padding, roughly you can give 15 pixels or something, which is up to you. So then what I'll do, you can see, as soon as I'm typing this, you can see the changes which is happening here. Okay, so this is how you typically do as a developer. So as you type, you need to see how the things are changing so that you can modify based on your outlook. So now what I will do, uh, I'll set my padding, I'll set my table. So now what I'll do is I'll access this selector, which is main. So inside main, which class I'm having? Table dot table. Okay. So now the reason why I'm accessing is because there are two tables here. So there is one table here, there is one table here. So what this is called as attribute as well as class. So what I'm basically saying for CSS is first you need to select main. Inside main, there is something called as a table. So access this first table. Okay, so it will access this first table inside your main. So now here what you need to do is, so here I'll give some width. So width you can give anything. So I will give some 80 VW. So VW is your view width. It's up to you. You can give anything you want. So the second thing is, so in here, I'll change the background color. The background color, I'll make it white. Sorry. Now you can see it is completely white. So now what I'll do, I'll remove this color. Now it comes to black again. So now I'll make this transparent. So how do I make this transparent? Select RGB, go to A, and then make it 0.3. So now you can see I have a transparent background. Okay, so now you can see I need some kind of margin between this and this, right? So where should I add the margin? So where is my header component? Here. But where am I calling my header component? Inside my app. So what I need to do, this header is wrapped inside this class. So whatever styles I need to add between these two components, we should add it where it has been defined. So I'll go to this component. Where is it? Inside here. I'll copy this, go to map.css, paste. Since it is a class, you have to use dot. So now what I'll do is margin bottom 10 pixel. So now you can see I'm getting a gap, but still I need more gap between this. So what I need to do, I'll just increase it a little bit, 90. Still it's not sufficient. So 24. So now you can see there is a difference between my header and then my section. So now what I will do, I'll start writing my CSS files here. So you have main table. So width I'm given. You can see this is my 80 view width. If you want to bigger, you can increase bigger, or else you can make it short. It's up to you. So now you can see this looks good. But to make it even more beautiful, in CSS there is something called as backdrop filter. I'll make this as blur. Let's make it some 6 pixel. So now you can see I have blurred my student section. So now what I'll do, since this looks sharpy, so what I'll do, I'll just go to border radius. I'll drop it to 6 pixels. So now you'll get a round corner around here. Okay, so now if I want to create some padding or margins for this student table section, so where do I need to add it? I need to add it inside my this class, right? So copy this thing, Control C, go to your student table container. So here, add a margin for this. So now you can see I have some gap between, but still I need more gap. So what I'll do is, so margin, right? I will make it more, like 30. Now you can see I have some gap between. So now it looks good. So now what I'll do is I'll start making this student title bigger. So for that, what I need to do, I'll go to my student table header, copy this class, and then here I'll increase the font size. I'll make it some 20 pixel. Make it 30. I want this to be bigger. Yeah. So now what I'll do is background color. So I'll copy the same thing which I have here, but what I'll do is I'll just increase the opacity of it, the transparency. I'll make it to 5. 5 is bigger, so I'll just make it to 2. Let's keep it at 3 itself. Yeah. Now you can see it looks good, right? So now I'll try to add some padding for this. So padding, let's keep it to 10 pixels. So now you can see this marks is not visible here. Just a minute. Okay. So try to keep whatever properties you're accessing using the dot notation should be same as the properties inside your data. So now you can see I'm successfully rendering my data inside my HTML using components. So every component, what I'm doing is I'm adding that component inside my app component. So how am I getting this data? This is not hard-coded data. This is dynamic data. Means you are defining the data inside your TS and then accessing inside your HTML. Okay. So now what you need to do is, so to make it, so where is this? T body, right? So copy this T body. So what you need to do is, I'll increase the font size of this. I'll make it like 12 pixel. It's too small. So let's go with 20. Yeah, now it's okay. So now I'm inside my student table. Um, yes. Okay. So now what I need to do is, so now you know that you are successfully running your TS as well as HTML as well as your, what do you call it as, CSS files. So now you know how do you link your data with your HTML as well as your CSS. So now say for example, I need to add some emojis here based on a condition. So go to this. Go to this website. It's called as an emoji copy. So now what I'll do is, so I'll copy a happy emoji. So this one, I'll copy this. So now if the student, so now what I'm trying to do is, so if the student marks is above 50, I need a happy emoji. So if it is below 50, I need a crying emoji. So for that, what I need to do, I need to use ngIf. So since this is 50 and 60, I will I will decrease 1 mark. So I'll make Sneha's marks as 20. So now what I need to do is, so go to your response. Okay, so here what I'll do, I'll remove this. How do you use a directive? Star ngIf is equals to student dot marks. If it is greater than or equals to 50, render this emoji. Okay. Second one is I'll copy a crying emoji. Where is it? Yeah, copy this. So now what I will do, I'll go to TD again. Similarly, I'll write a condition. So ng if is equals to student dot marks is less than or equals to 20. What I need to render? A crying emoji. So now you can see here, based on the condition of the marks, so now you can see here, just a minute. So there is some. I just copy paste this itself. So yeah, so now you can see that based on this condition, so if the marks is greater than 50, I'm displaying this happy emoji. So now similarly, if I want something which is below, I'll copy this, go over here. There is some, so now you can see. So what's happening here? So based on the condition using ng if, so what I'm doing is, if the student dot marks is greater than 50, I'm displaying this div. So if it is less than, or if say for example, if it is equals to 20, I'm displaying crying emoji. Similar way, you can add different reactions based on this. So say for example, if I add a new guy here, so let's say his name is Akash. Okay. You can see as soon as I'm adding inside my TS file, you can see Angular is automatically generating it. So I don't need to write my HTML again. So I'll make this 80, 89. Now you can see my response is empty here, but due to my condition here, if the marks is greater than or equals to 50, I'm getting this emoji. So now, as of now, today, this is done. So we have successfully learned what are data bindings. So what are directives? So what are directives? So what is ngif? What is ng for? So ngif we use to based on a condition. You can see here, based on condition, we are rendering it. And then ng for, it is used to loop a data which is inside an array. And then how do you access your data inside a component to HTML? You have different ways. One is interpolation, property binding, event binding. So in tomorrow class, next class, we are going to cover what is two-way binding, because to understand this two-way binding, you need to understand forms. So first we'll cover forms and then two-way binding, and then we'll cover what are pipes in the next class. So try to practice this. So try to create different components. So in the next class, what we'll do is we'll create a form. So once you click on add student, so what happens is whatever data you enter inside the form will get rendered inside here. So here we are hard coding it, right? So in the next class, we won't hard code this. So we'll create a separate form for this. So you can add any number of students, and then you can create two actions here, like remove or else delete or else edit. So all these operations will be done in the next future classes. So thanks. So if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comment section.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll wind up for the day. We'll meet again by Monday. As you all know, students, weekends, we don't have a session. Like tomorrow and day after tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, we don't have a session. Again, we are conducting on Monday at 7:30. So we'll all meet on Monday at 7:30. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable class. So we'll
Thank you,
meet by
ma'am.
Monday.
Thanks,
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you for joining. Good night.